Now we are going to write the unit test cases for the controller. If we need to mock any of the data, then we can use the Mockito. And for the assertions, we will be using JUnit 5, which is a Jupyter one, and we'll be using the Springboard. Of course, we'll be using the Springboard test, and we'll be writing the controller test cases using mock MVC. Now we are going to write the test cases for the controller. These are for the unit test cases. So server will not be started completely. If the server starts completely and we are performing a test, those will be integration test cases, which will be covered later. For now, we are looking at the unit test case. In case of the unit test cases, if we require any of the objects to be mocked or the methods needs to be mocked, then we can use the Mockito. And the assertions will be using Springboard test assertions. Libraries are the dependencies for the unit test cases for this REST API is already been included as part of the project creation. Let's check the pom.xml. Pom.xml already has a starter text. So internally it will be using Mockito, JUnit and Springboard test frameworks for the libraries. Now let's write our first test case. There will be one test case already be provided, that is for checking the Springboard server. So we are going to write for our own controller, which is welcome controller. So let's write new class welcome controller. I'm using underscore test, so just give the differentiation. Now we'll be writing our first test case for default one, which we are expecting here as a welcome user, and it will be called on API/v1. So we'll be writing test. So here welcome, I'm using it for this method, so I'm expecting the welcome user. So now we need to mock the MVC. So let's say mock MVC, and we'll get the mock MVC, and we need to auto-write it, provide. And now as part of the mock MVC, this dot mock MVC dot perform, and we need to provide the request builder. So in this case, we use the get method of the mock HTTP servlet request builder. As part of it, we will be providing the API URL. We are going to print it. So I'm calling the print of the result handler, and then I'm going to expect request status as OK. So this would be our first test case. Now we need to notate that this is a test case. So we'll be using MVC test. And here I'll be using the controller. Which controller that we are using? We are using welcome controller.class. So we need to annotate a controller test class as web MVC test, and we need to provide the controller, and we are going to auto-write the mock MVC, and as part of the mock MVC we are going to perform, and we need to pass the API. So in this case the API/v1. So when we are saying that the API/v1, I'm printing the result and expecting OK as the status. So let's save it and run the test case, run as a JUnit test case. If you see the output, the Spring has been initialized and the request has been sent to the API, and the status is 200, and the body has come as welcome user as expected. All this information has been printed because we use a print, and it has been success because the assertion we gave it as a OK status, which is 200. Now how am I going to compare the output or the body? So in this case, welcome user, I would like to compare it. Now, how are you going to validate the body? So for the body, we need to add expect, and we need to get the content, and be careful while selecting the content, because the content will be having the request and the result as well. So we need to consider result one, and we need to use compare with string, and the expected content of the string is welcome user. So save it and rerun the test case. Now we will get the result as success because exactly the matching. This is how we are going to write our test cases. So let's write the test case for capturing the request parameter. Let's copy paste the same, and this time I'm using the welcome user, and as part of the welcome user we need to pass the request parameter, which is a username. And if we don't pass it, by default it will be taking a default one and will be provided as welcome default one. In this case, default one is Ranga. So let's write welcome user, and I say default. In case of the default, we are expecting Ranga as a default parameter. Let's maximize it. So here default value is Ranga, so we are expecting welcome Ranga and 3 exclamatory marks. So let's put the same, and the endpoint is /user. So we need to update to /user, and let's write another test case for request parameter, and we need to pass the query parameter. So we'll be calling query parameter, and in this case user, and we will be passing as, in this case I'm calling as Ram, and what I will be expecting here is Ram. So let's run the test cases. So in case of the default, we are expecting Ranga. In case of the query param user, we are expecting Ram, the whatever the value that we have passed in. And before running our test cases, there is a small correction at the query parameters. I used as a user, but as part of our query param, the value is username. Let's correct that one as username and rerun the test cases. So here I'm expecting all test cases to be passed. So let's open the unit test cases. All test case has been passed. So let's implement for the path variable as well. So let's implement for the get user ID. Let's use for the get user ID, and we need to pass the user ID. So let's check the API. So user/user ID. So user/user ID. I'm passing user ID as 1001 and expecting 1001 over here. Let's run the unit test cases. 4 test has been passed. Okay, now let's look at the post API testing. So in our case, here we need to pass user details, and we are expecting either create the status or the pad request. So let's create the unit test case for this one. As part of the save user API unit testing, we are going to split each and every one into a separate one, so to understand them better. So for example, here the get API can be separated. So let's refactor this one as get API, and whatever here we are getting it, all this one also can be written as result actions. As part of the result actions, I'm performing the API and printing it and validating expect OK and expecting content to be. This way it is easier for our understanding, but writing in a single line makes it easier and shorten the code, but this gives you more readability. We are going to write in this fashion for this save. So first of all, we need to create object of the user. So user details. I have created the new user details, but we can't pass that as is because we are making API testing, API unit testing, not the method testing. So we need to submit the user details as a string because REST APIs will go by string. So first of all, let's create post one, and here we need to pass /API/v1/user, and this is a post API. And for this post API, the content type, the one that we are sending it is in as a JSON. So we are going to say media type JSON. For this post API, I need to send the data. So nothing but the content that I need to send it as a content. But we don't have that content yet. So we need to create the content using the user details. So for that, I'm going to use object mapper to convert user details into a string. So the content is mapper.write as a string of user details. So the content would go from the user details like this. So let's reorganize the code. So as part of the user details dot set username. I have set the properties on the user details and convert into a content, and I have passed the content to a post API. Now let's perform the API call, the start mark, and perform the post API, and at this time I'm printing here also, and we are capturing all these things as result actions. So result actions expecting status as is created. So this is place we are sending it as a created on the success side, and along with that, when we are returning it, we are returning user details object itself. So when we are getting the object here, we are expecting user ID as well. So let's run the unit test case. So now after valid data has been set and the application JSON has been set as a content type, and we are expecting created. So if you see the test cases, all the test case has been passed, including save user. So in this case, I'm renaming it save user created. Now, how are you going to validate the data? What I mean is here, as part of the save user, we are setting it up a random user ID, and we need to evaluate this one. So there are two ways that we can evaluate this one by using JSON, and another one is by converting the response into an object, because the save user API would return JSON string, and we need to convert it back to the user details and we can run the assertions. So let's see how we can do it. So this is approach 1. So result actions we need to return, and we need to get the response. From the response we need to get content as a string. So let's take as content as string, and now we need to convert this string into an object. Let's rename the content as string to save user JSON, and we are going to convert the save user JSON string into an object using mapper. Mapper.read value. As part of the read value, we need to use the save user JSON, and we need to give object class. So here we would like to convert to the user details, so we need to give the class, and we capture this one as saved user. On the saved user, we can use the assertions. So we are going to run the first not null assertion on the saved user and assert not null of saved user dot get user ID. So this way we can evaluate it whether user ID, whether it is null or not. In our case, it's going to be random one. So that's the reason we are evaluating as a not null. So test cases are being run, and all the test cases has been passed. So let's look at the approach 2. Let's take the result actions. On the result actions, we will be adding an expectation, and that is using the JSON path. And JSON path is from the MVC matchers. So here we're going to mark MVC result matchers, and here we are going to take the expression. Right now I'm going to check with whether it exists or not. So I'm going to check exist, and I need to pass the expression. That expression is user ID. And if the user ID is present, then this expectation would pass. Let's rerun the test case. All the test case has been passed. We can follow any of these approaches to evaluate the post return data by converting JSON string into an object and evaluating on top of object. Otherwise, we can use the directly JSON path of MVC matches. So now let's look at the next one, which is a bad request. So let's copy paste the same and modify the exceptions. So here I'm changing it to the bad request. If username is not set, then we will get the bad request. So we're going to take out this one, and rest of things exactly the same, and we are expecting bad request is bad request. Let's rerun the test cases. After saving, the test cases are being run. So all 6 test cases save bad request also passed. In this way, we are going to create for remaining as well. For put mapping, it's exactly similar to the post mapping, and the logic also exactly the same. So now let's copy paste the same logic so we can ensure that all the test has been passed. I'm copying pasting the same. First, let's correct the update user, which is a put one. So here, instead of the post API, I'm going to use put. Import the put and change the API as put API. And here we are going to use approach 2. So let's remove this, and here update user, the bad request, and here I'm going to use the put and rename as put. So until this point it is good. Now we need to evaluate whether the put mapping URL is same, and here it's a little bit different because we have been passing the path variable. So you just set the path variable. So here I'm giving some dummy user ID. Let's save all the files and rerun the test cases. So update user has failed. In case of the update API, in case of the put mapping and the update user, we are sending the response code as accepted, not the created. So let's update this one is accepted. Now the test case will pass. All the test cases are being rerun, and this time all the test case has been passed. Now let's look at the next one, which is a delete mapping. So this is the delete user ID. So let's create. Even for the delete user ID, it's almost same way, because here we need to pass the path variable and we need to check the status and the response, just like a get API. The only the difference is instead of the get, we will be calling delete. So let's create that one. Delete, and I'm passing /API/v1/user, and for the delete we're passing user ID also. So I'm passing user ID, dummy user ID, and I'm saying delete API. Now we need to call this one. So this dot mock MVC dot perform, and we'll be using delete API, and we're going to print it and capture as a result action. Result actions dot and expect, and here the status as accepted. Let's verify one more time. Yes, we are taking as accepted. And the next we are taking the delete user ID. So result actions and expect content. We are taking from the result matches content, and we are going to compare with expected content. In this case, delete user ID and user. Let's save all of them and rerun the test cases. All test case has been passed, including delete user ID. Now let's look at the other one, patching up. Patching also exactly the same, but in case of the patching, we have the user details and the path variable. It's very much similar to update user or save user. So let's copy the same. So I'm changing it to this is a patch user, and I'm sending it up. And as part of the patch user, user ID is being updated with whatever we have sent the data. I'm sending with 1001, and I'm expecting user ID is exist and user ID is 1001. So let's add that accession. We are giving the value as 1001. Now let's rerun the test cases. All the test cases passed, and the latest test case, which is a patch user created. Let's make it as patch user accepted, and let's update the update user also. It is as accepted. Now let's look at the other one. The other one is nothing but our error endpoint. In this case, we are getting different status and different content. At the end, even though it is returning the results and even the exception handling is being taken care at controller global level, controller advice, or at the API level, exception handler, both the case at the end we will be receiving response with as a string, and it has its own status. And let's write the test cases for error also. So I'm writing the test case for error API. I'm putting API. So all we need to do is we need to make a call with status, which is a request parameter. So let's copy the same from one of our users where we are sending the query parameters or request parameters, and the endpoint is error and the query parameters. So let's separate this one as we discussed earlier. So this is a API. So as part of the API, we are setting it up. So API.query parameter, and in this case, we need to set the query parameter as the status. So let's put the status as completed. So in this case, we are expecting success scenario. So let's put success. Capture as the result actions. In the result actions, we are going to check the status is okay or not. We are returning the okay status. So okay, and result actions that expect is whatever the status that we have sent. In this case, we are sending as a completed, and I am expecting completed. Let's write the next one. This is for unknown error. So let's check the unknown error. So we need to pass the error, and we will be getting unknown exception, which will be handled at the global level. So let's write unknown, and here I am setting error, and this time we are getting a different status. So let's check the global one, global exception handler, and here we are returning internal server error. So we are going to check with that internal server error, and what we are expecting from it is the global unknown. Please try after some time. So let's set the expectation also the same. Now let's write the test case for not found scenario also. And for the not found, the response is not found. So let's copy the same, save all, rerun the test cases. Okay, error API not found. Let's re-evaluate it. We are sending as a not found, not an internal server error. So let's correct is not found and rerun the test cases. All the test cases been passed, including error scenario.